Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Hunt Lift Eat podcast, brought to you by Hunt Lift Eat Official. I'm Carter, here once again with my favorite civilian, Luke Cox, the man.
Yeah, DD-214 in hand, out of the Army finally. Glad to be here. I guess I'm technically still in the Army till May, but I'm done now. Fully
I
on
didn't mean to
terminal
share
leave.
that out of turn, if that was, we could call it that out.
No, it's good. Yeah, I didn't even think about it. This is my first thing since getting out. I signed out on leave, or I signed out of the Army yesterday. Wednesday, drove back from Louisiana, back in Colorado, ready to enjoy life as a civilian, and fittingly so, somebody who's also made that transition. I'm really excited for our guest, who is an extremely impressive person with a resume longer than I am tall, which isn't that impressive. I guess I'm short, but pretty cool. I'm excited for today.
Yeah, Kirstie Ennis, welcome to the podcast. You know, former USMC, extreme athlete, hunter, a little bit of everything actually. So welcome to the podcast, Kirstie.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Looking forward to it.
Cool. So let's start at the beginning, Kirstie. Let's roll it back. Can you talk about a little bit with your experience with the outdoors and growing up? And obviously you have an extreme passion for spending time outside. What was that like for you kind of growing up?
Oh man, growing up, I was raised by two Marine parents. Go figure. But they always supported me in doing any kind of team sport imaginable. You know, whether softball, volleyball, any of it. They encouraged me to just dabble and get out there. But my background and what I am doing now, as far as in the mountains, knew nothing about it. I call Florida home. So I knew nothing about winter, snow, altitude, elevation, any of that. It was just total beach living. But then even on the flip side of that, I don't really come from a background of hunting, really. I mean, don't get me wrong. We did smaller things like whitetail, a little bit of hogs, turkey, stuff that you can find in Florida. But I never really got into, or even was really exposed to any of the sports or the outdoors and the capacity that I'm involved in it now, up until after I got hurt in the Marine Corps.
Sorry, I thought my internet went out for a second. Go ahead, Luke.
No, you're good. So, kind of talk us through what led you up to the Marine Corps when you started thinking about that. Was that something with having two, parents that were in the Corps? Were you dead set on that from an early age, or was that a decision you made later in life? Kind of what did that look like?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories to tell of all time. But yeah, my mom and my dad got married at 18 years old. And shortly after, my dad joined the Marine Corps, again, out of Navarre Beach, Florida. Fast forward 9 years later, my family and I are living on Marine Corps Base 29 Palms. And my mom comes home at 27 years old and tells my dad, I think these female Marines are really badass. And my dad turns to my mom and says, I will never be married to a female Marine. So you can imagine how that goes. She fires back, she turns around, goes out the door, goes to the recruiter's office, gets an age waiver and joins the Marine Corps. So leaving me at home with my dad while she went off to boot camp. And but one of my earliest memories is of my mom walking across the parade deck on Paris Island. And I just remember having this just huge amount of pride. I had these two Marine parents, these two superheroes that got up every single day and put the uniform, the cape on, and we're doing something, for the greater good, bigger than themselves. And my Barbie dolls had dress blues on, my baby dolls wore camis. My favorite movie, coming home literally every single day after school, was a VHS on Women Marines Boot Camp. And I religiously, I would watch it numerous times a day, and as soon as I got off the school bus. And so I knew, I don't think it came as a surprise to anybody in my family that I was going to join. I think that was always on everybody's radar. I knew that I wanted to join at a very early age, but I don't think, my mom and my dad basically wanted me to finish up at least my bachelor's degree. So I graduated high school when I was 15. I did 2 years of community college at Pensacola Junior College, where I was living in Florida. And then I honestly was just bored sitting in this chemistry lab. And I looked around the room and was like, this dude's not going to do it. She can't do it. This, that, and the other, which just sounds terrible of me, very judgmental. But that was kind of that motivation for me to I needed to be challenged. I needed to do something else. And so I left that chemistry lab 4 months after my 17th birthday, and walked into the recruiter's office, and there was no, like, they didn't have to sell me on anything. I already knew like what I wanted to do. I wanted to have these, like, my whole family has Rubbermaid boxes of like their uniforms or awards and medals and whatnot. And I remember digging through those in the garage when I was a little kid and just thinking how cool it was. Like I wanted to have my own Rubbermaid box. And so like when I went into the recruiter's office and told them that, they just looked at me like I was insane. But sure enough, they were like, hey, you're only 17 years old. You need to bring your parents in. They need to sign this paperwork. And honestly, at that point in time, like I was bored. I was a little mischievous. I was never doing anything malicious, but I just needed to get out of this, super small town in Florida. So my mom, she basically signed immediately. It was like a good riddance, get out of here, like do something, get out of my hair. And then with my dad, like he so badly wanted me to like go forth and become an officer. He did not want me to go the enlisted route. And I think that's just because of the time that I was joining, and he knew like my intentions behind my service. So I had to lie through my teeth basically to get him to sign, and told him that I would do a desk job like my mom did. She was supply. And yeah, eventually he signed, and I got caught in my lie the day that they dropped me off for boot camp. And but the rest was history. I was on my dad's shit list for a little while, but it worked out in my favor.
What year was this? What year did you join?
That was 2008.
Okay, so the height of GWAT. So yeah, pretty understandable. Your old man to have some concerns there.
Yeah. And so my mom never deployed. Like it's interesting if you were to look at my entire lineage. Like I also have my great aunt Lydia was one of the first female active duty Marines during World War II. And like between her and my mom, like my whole family's mentality behind women serving were always like free a man to fight. And so I think with my dad's perspective, he was like, shit, she's going to go into aviation. And he knew that my end game was to pick up my wings. So I think from his perspective, especially, like he had deployed, he had gone to the Middle East, and he kind of knew, things that I'd be seeing, or at least what I was going to attempt to seek out, I guess.
What did your dad do in the Marine Corps?
He was artillery.
Hell yeah. So go to boot camp. Did you go to Parris Island or?
Yeah. So back then, back in my day, that was the only place that females could still go. 4th Battalion was still a thing.
How was that going through as a female?
Honestly, there is nothing scarier than female drill instructors. I don't care who you are, like what your basic training looked like, but there is nothing more terrifying than a Marine Corps female drill instructor. Like just awful. And they're like the smallest, and they don't even have to yell at you or anything. They just like whisper to you. You're immediately petrified. I will say that I made boot camp way more harder on myself than I needed to. Like just, again, 17 years old, just whatever. There's an attitude. I thought I knew what I was getting myself into for 13 weeks of hell. But of course, I made things a little bit harder on myself. We'll just leave it at that.
I've done that my entire career, so I can definitely relate.
Yeah.
The last 11 years could have been a lot easier if I was a little less stupid.
Perfect.
So you went into aviation. I was just reading through your bio. So you went in as was an aviation mechanic, and then you became a door gunner?
Right. Yeah. So I went in as an airframer, which is like all of the hydraulics, composite repair, structural maintenance, stuff like that. And then eventually I started seeing these people walking around in tan flight suits, and knew that was the route that I wanted to go.
So how does that work? I'm an infantryman, so I'm very unfamiliar with the aviation side of the house. So how do you go from being a mechanic to a door gunner? What does that process look like?
It really is just like making sure that you have like your leadership's vote of confidence, and that you are knowledgeable and well versed in your specific area for maintenance. Like the ideal crew on the helicopters that we were on, obviously pilot, co-pilot, but then the two door gunners and then the tail gunner, we would all have our specific fields that we were specialized in. So like I was hydraulics, we'd have avionics, all electronics, and then flight line for power plants and whatnot. So really it's just making sure that the people like in your shop and your leadership really believe in you and trust you to pick up like a secondary MLS.
Is that do you think that comes from just your personality as an individual? Were you looking for a little more adventure or something more exciting to add to, your time over there? Add that on top of the mechanic side of things, or
Yeah, definitely. And well, I also like my whole life, I've always just kind of been the underdog. Like I'm always the smallest, I'm always the shortest. I'm always like stacked up against something. And so I think I've always, no matter what the situation was, always sought out the challenge. And the moment that someone tells me no, that's when I'm going to be like, yeah, hold my beer, watch this. Like let's see what happens.
oh yeah,
And so I think that's really what it was. Is like there were a lot of people that kept telling me that I was too small. And so I was like, okay, well, here we go. And after I picked up my wings, I ended up picking up my combat wings, and it's the most like special thing that I have from my time in service. So,
How long after you became a door gunner did you deploy to a combat zone?
oh, very quickly. So I actually got back for my first deployment in August of 2011. I went down to Hawaii to train with Heavy Marine Helicopter Squadron 362, and then went through my aerial gunner, the whole steps, the curriculum, whatever you want to call it, through that. And then I was right back in Afghanistan, January 2012. So 5-6 months.
Where were you in Afghanistan?
A little bit all over the place, but southern Helmand. So yeah, flew all over though.
I spent some time in Helmand. Never want to go back.
Yeah, I was waiting for that response.
Yeah, there's parts of Afghanistan I would definitely go see again. I always get a question when I go on podcasts and stuff. They're like, what would be your dream hunt? And I think like hunting ibex in the Hindu Kush would be incredible. Like go back to Afghanistan if the Taliban ever gets their shit together, and allows recreation. But yeah, Helmand, there's not a critter alive that would draw me back into Helmand or Kandahar.
Nope. Nope.
So let's set the stage for what was going on. What was prior leading up to your injury and everything that happened. What was that deployment looking like? What was your operational tempo? What kind of missions were you guys running?
Well, so just to be very clear, like my two deployments were very different. The first one, it was very much so just a maintainer. Like I never really left the wire. We would go from Leatherneck over to Bastion, and that's kind of the extent of that. But after I picked up my wings and deployed again, we were doing everything from insertions, extractions, drug raids, just simple missions, sometimes like combat resupplies, and then obviously any kind of like medical calls.
What platform were you on?
This 53.
Okay.
So yeah, Super Sea Stallions.
I'm not very familiar. I've never been in one of those.
They're the big bitches.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Been in a lot of Blackhawks and Chinooks, but.
Well, yeah. So to put that into perspective, then, like the 53s, we lift Chinooks when they go down. Like that's how big.
That's
a big
insane.
vehicle.
Yes.
Yeah, for those that aren't familiar with what we're talking about, so the Chinooks are the helicopters you guys see probably commonly if you're around an Army installation, especially, that have the two rotors, and we use those for troop transport. They can sling load large vehicles. I've actually watched one sling load a crashed Blackhawk, which was crazy. So if you guys can sling load Chinooks, that's even more impressive. So that's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah, very much so.
So kind of talk us through what, if you're willing to talk about it, but, what happened with the crash and kind of the stage for that and what that series of events, looked like.
Yeah. So, yeah, I got to Afghanistan in January 2012. And on January 19th, 2012, we had a helicopter go down that killed all 6 crew members. And their call sign that night was Irontail 06. What we did to be able to honor those Marines is we painted one of our aircraft 06, in their memory. It had Irontail 06. We will never forget Irontail 06, the nose landing gear door. Had all of their names painted on the sides. We had 50 cals painted for them. That was a helicopter because on the second deployment, I was actually flying on the 53 Delta, which was actually flown in Vietnam. So it was time to start retiring these aircraft. And so that was an aircraft that wasn't necessarily being flown too much. And it was kind of, I don't want to say put to the side, but it was something that we were going to preserve for something very special to fly for those guys that we lost. But aircraft 01 was my aircraft. Like, that is the one that I flew on day in and day out. That is the one that I maintained. That was my baby. So fast forward to June 23rd, 2012. It should have started like any other day and any other mission. It was very rare that we would go out during the daytime unless it was obviously something very critical. And so the original flight plan for June 23rd was we were going to go out in the evening. We were going to do combat resupply. Mission evolved throughout the day, and we ended up going out much earlier than we were originally supposed to. And it was because we were going to do this resupply, and then we were going to become space available. So we were going to drop off Army medics to a location, and then go outbound and do an extraction of Marines in an area called Musukala. And unfortunately, like when I was running out to the flight line to turn up my aircraft 01, my maintenance officer ran out there, snatched me up, and told me that there was a change of plans, that I was actually not going to go out on aircraft 01, the lead aircraft. We were going to take aircraft 06 out because we had to get ours out on it, so that memorial helicopter. And it was very strange because 01 was, again, my aircraft, but I wasn't on it. It was the lead that night. I ended up being the second aircraft on the memorial helicopter, and everything was going as planned. We went out, did our gun runs. We went to the fuel pits, went out, picked up our space available Army medics, and then we were going to essentially be doing like a taxi drop at Forward Operating Base Nowzad, and unfortunately we never landed safely. My dad gets on me for saying it this way, but my pilot choked, flat out. He failed to execute some very specific maneuvers, and I will give him the credit of, or at least the benefit of the doubt, rather, that like there was a lot going on. We had been being spotlighted. We were being bloomed out the entire night, which is basically where the enemy out there, they like signal where we're at. They're basically following us the entire time to figure out what's going on. And there was a brownout situation, which, whatever, perfect storm, I guess, as well. But the very short version is my pilot choked. And the last thing I remember is the nose of the aircraft, like coming up and then rolling left. Luke, with you being in the military, like I know, like you know what it is to like lose your hover bubble. That's essentially what happened. And so when we went nose up, we rolled left, and I was on the left gun. And so the last thing I remember is by this point, we left in the middle of the afternoon, but then later in the day, like obviously night vision goggles down, just staring at the ground. And in my head, it was like, I knew we were fucked. Like there was another way around it. Like not only like inertia or momentum, whatever you want to call it, like you can feel it on your insides, but then you also like, you can just hear it in everybody's voices. And so in my mind, it was just, I'm going to count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, mains on deck, as if we were landing safely. And I was calling that out to my pilots. And as soon as I said mains on deck in my head is when we hit the ground. And I had some very, very severe injuries. So my assumption is obviously a 50 caliber machine gun on a GAU 21 mount. It sticks out the side of the helicopter. It hit the ground before obviously me or the helicopter did. Came back up and through my face, and so I was in and out of consciousness, literally through my face, by the way. Like I could fit my fist through my face, lost my jaw, shattered teeth, orbital socket, broken nose, all of that. So I was in and out of consciousness, and I just remember hearing my pilot scream for my tail gunner. Obviously lost ICS, there was no like comms or anything anymore, and I could just remember them calling for my gunnery sergeant. My gunnery sergeant had actually, he went out the back of the aircraft and hit the river rocks before the helicopter did. And so in my mind, like I didn't even know how bad it was. I just remember like rolling my tongue around and like, this doesn't sound awful, but like having little nubs for teeth basically. And just like, there was just so much grit. And it was strange because I couldn't tell you what had happened to my face. I knew that I was in pain, like all over my body. But I just wanted to know where my tail gunner was. And so once we figured out where he was at, I tried to like stand up, and like both of my arms tore from their sockets. My leg collapsed underneath me. And then thank God for one of those Army medics that we had actually picked up and were just supposed to be dropping off, because he's the one that kept me out of shock and kept me in it. And when they realized that like I was not walking, obviously, 2nd Battalion 5th Marines came out from the operating base, provided security, stripped everything from the helicopter for us, and then they threw me and my tail gunner into my lead aircraft 01, my baby, threw me and him into the back as the casualties, and then basically just evacuated us to back to Camp Bastion. And then that's when, like, the last thing that I remember before, like, just knocking out for that 40-minute, however long flight, was the new left door gunner, like, bent down next to me and was like, "Don't close your fucking eyes because you won't open them again." And that's when, like, my mind immediately went to, I always flew with a rosary, my blood shit, and then a picture of my mom, my dad, and my little sister. And I just told myself that I wasn't going to die without seeing my little sister, and, like, just stared at this blue cabin overhead light for what felt like an eternity, and then everything just went black. And then finally came to at the, like, makeshift hospital, the tent hospital on Camp Bastion. And my gunnery sergeant and my sergeant major, they, like, were just standing there staring at me and crying. And that's pretty much when I realized that my deployment was over, and I was fucking devastated. Like, the hardest thing, like, even well beyond my recovery and everything else, like, we were 6 weeks away from coming home. Like the hardest part of all of it was just the fact that, like, I had just been combat meritoriously promoted to sergeant. I had just, like, we were supposed to go home together. Like, we were supposed to retire the colors for that unit together. We were supposed to, like, retire the CH-53 Delta, that platform, together. And that in that moment, that's kind of when, yeah, life went into a tailspin, I guess.
It's pretty incredible that you went through all that and your biggest concern was leaving early, and not about your physical well-being. But I think it's just kind of indicative of who you are as a person and your drive and all that. So I'm assuming you got evacs to Germany to Landstuhl?
Kandahar first. Lovely place. Kandahar, Germany, and then Walter Reed, and then finally to Balboa, so Naval Medical Center, San Diego.
So throughout, that process, kind of talk through kind of what's going through your head as you're, I'm assuming, in and out of surgeries, getting different prognosis, kind of talk us through what's going on with you mentally, how are you handling this? What are your thoughts?
I honestly didn't realize how bad it was. Like, when I first got hurt, like, again, I was, like, more focused on, like, why can't they just sew me up and keep me here? I just want to go on the plane home with my friends, my guys. Like, that's it. So when I realized, like, the severity of the injuries, like, I knew that I had fractures in my C2, C3, and C4. There was a British plastic surgeon who actually, I have, like, gnarly pictures of what my face looked like. And, like, when I realized how bad that was, I was kind of like, okay, it makes a little bit of sense. Like, I can't sit out here in this desert, in this dump, basically. Like, and then they wouldn't touch my leg. And I think that was the most concerning part for me. For weeks, no one touched it. They didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know how to approach it. And so when I finally made it to Walter Reed, like, in Germany, actually, this is a terrible story. My mom will probably get mad at me for sharing this one. But, like, in Germany, when I was finally, like, coherent enough and really understanding what was going on, my command didn't really tell my family how bad it was. And I don't think anybody was really telling me how bad it was because they didn't want it to get back to my family. Like, they knew that, okay, they basically called my mom and said, hey, your baby girl's hurt. She's coming home. She has a cut on her chin. She has a broken leg. They didn't tell her that, like, I had no face or anything like that. So when I finally get to talk to my mom on the phone, she's cracking up laughing. She is like, baby girl, you must be on some great medicine. They must have you on good drugs. And I say, fuck you, and hang up the phone. And it literally, that was my last words as, as I'm leaving Germany to be able to get back stateside. And so when my parents found out that I was hurt, they didn't know really where I was going. They didn't know if it was going to be DC or California. So they were basically just waiting in Florida for, like, the go-ahead, like, which way we start driving. And so when I finally got to DC, that's when the doctors and everybody were like, we're going to have to amputate your leg. And they wouldn't do it there. They were, like, again, trying to decide if I was going to be what kind of a polytrauma. And they finally all agreed that because of the facial reconstruction that I needed, that San Diego was going to be the best place. But then when I got to San Diego and they told me that we're going to cut your leg off, I basically pitched a fit and said, hey, I want to try and save it. Because at that point in time, I'm like, I can't stay in with no leg. I didn't know any amputees or anything like that. I didn't know any disabled people who were able to stay in. So my knee-jerk reaction was, take care, like put me all back together and keep me intact for as long as possible until I can figure out what my future is going to look like. Then there's also like the very trivial side of just being, you know, a young woman, 22 years old. Like, again, my face is messed up now, and now you're going to cut my leg off too. I'm still in, you know, C collars and all sorts of contraptions for my spine. Like, I just wanted to leave everything together. Obviously that didn't happen. I fought quite a bit, to be able to keep my leg, and then, they just finally had to cut it off. So that's like also a double-edged sword, I think, too. Like, I think mentally and emotionally it was the best thing that I could have done for myself by waiting. I'm obviously missing a lot more leg than, I could basically have another 10 inches of my leg if I would have probably let them cut it off when they wanted to. So yeah, hindsight's always 20/20, I guess. But yeah, I actually fought after all of these surgeries. To date, I've had 48 now. All of these surgeries, I fought 3 different med boards, and then finally had to accept the medical retirement, which was really, I think that was the moment that I actually really felt robbed. Like, there was a leadership at the hospital that was telling me, like, oh, no way, you're going to be able to go back to flying. You can be like the first drill instructor that's an amputee. Like, you can do all of these things. And then, like, as more of this started to unfold, I realized that everything that I knew and everything that I loved, like, I really felt like my purpose was the Marine Corps, just got pulled out from underneath me. And that's when I really started to struggle. So.
I'm assuming you're above the knee?
I am above the knee. Yep.
So, for those that are unfamiliar with you know, the amputation side of the house, kind of talk through just the difficulty and the struggles, because I think a lot of people think it's as simple as you just take a prosthetic, you put it on, and then you can just go run a marathon, right? Like, you know, and I've been educated on this just through the last, you know, several years, really, and having some relationships with folks that have gone through this, and just like how difficult it is with, you know, having the prosthetic not fitting correctly, or just the issues that come, the pain that's follow on just from what the prosthetic causes, having to learn to walk with that. Just kind of talk about kind of those struggles and how you were able to persevere through all that.
Yeah. Okay. When I learned that they were going to amputate my leg below the knee, I was like, easy day. Like, that is a paper cut. And to this day, like, I say I'm joking, but I don't really think I am. Like, I would sell my soul to the devil to get my knee back. And I guess the easiest way to explain that is there's 3 joints on each side, right? You got your hip, your knee, and your ankle. Your ankle is really just for articulation, but your knee joint is the weight-bearing joint in your body. And when you take that away, like, I can't bear weight on the end of my femur anymore. Like, everything has to come from my pelvic cradle. So my core has to stay insanely strong. And, like, I am not kidding when I say my sockets and everything have to go all the way up into the sitting bone to be able to stabilize myself to walk. So obviously not like I am joking when I say the paper cut thing, but being a below the knee amputee, like, you could step back into your prosthetic as long as you have a good socket. You could step into that socket and you could take off out the door. Like, after you heal and after you kind of like callus the end of your residual limb, it's tough, but it's not that tough. And I am only confident in saying this just because I've gone through below the knee, through the knee, above the knee, and was told at one point in time that they might have to take my hip. And in that moment when they told me that they were going to have to take my hip, I flat out told them, don't wake me up again. So I am very, very grateful to have what I do have as far as like what's left of my femur. But the higher an amputation goes, like, it really is night and day. Like, even now, like, if they ever even came to me and said they'd have to take another inch or 2 of my femur, that takes away my leverage, that takes away my power, and again, that takes away more stability. So yeah, it's tough. And I had mentally prepared, like I said, to be a below the knee. So as they kept going higher and higher, like, I had no idea what to expect. I was absolutely terrified. And now, I mean, it's actually kind of funny since I'm sitting here with my prosthetic on, but like now I'm sitting in my wheelchair, you know, like it is incredibly painful to be upright and moving for 8, 10, 12 hours a day because of how high everything has to come up. And I am very fortunate right now. I had a surgery about a year and a half ago that I don't have any phantom pain anymore. But that's a whole other beast that so many amputees have to face. And yeah, my heart hurts for them if they do, because it is a debilitating pain that there is no treatment out there for.
Can you explain, just for the audience that might be unfamiliar with phantom pain, like what that actually is?
Yeah, so honestly, like phantom pain is this incredible nerve pain, like this incredible nerve sensation where basically all of your cells that have been cut off, they are firing to try and find their other halves. They're trying to find what was severed. And so your brain is still searching for like what it's missing, especially if you're not a congenital amputee and you lose something traumatically. It is your body still trying to wake up what's missing. And so there is no medicine out there that can control any of this pain. It is totally a mind over matter situation. And like the only thing when I had severe phantom pain that would work for me is called mirror therapy. So I would have to put a wall length mirror in between my legs and trick my brain. I would see the reflection of my right leg and it would think that it's my left leg, and I'd be able to move my leg around and trick myself. That's the only way that kind of pain ever goes away. And so, yeah, I mean, it literally, like, the only way that I can really explain what it feels like is like someone like hammering a nail through the end of your leg and straight up it. Or there's other sensations where it's like if you're laying on your stomach, it feels like your leg is bent around backwards and like through the couch or bed or whatever surface you're laying on, and it like feels like it's in quicksand being pulled off. It is excruciating.
Woof. That's
why that was detailed.
no, it's good. I mean, it's good for folks to understand because there's a lot of, especially coming out of the global war on terror, of folks that are going through this and have gone through it. And a lot of people, I don't think, appreciate that it's not just the trauma of the actual event, it's everything afterwards that's probably worse. That, it's not only just learning to walk and learning to move and try to get, your life back. It's also all these other medical issues and the pain that continues that I think a lot of people need to be aware of, because it doesn't get talked about enough. Everybody's like, oh no, he lost his leg. Like, that's terrible. But it's like, it's way more than that. So I appreciate you kind of going through all this. I'm sure it's not easy to talk about, but so you're going through all this. It's obviously extremely difficult, but looking at it from now, you've been able to do some incredible things that people with all their appendages don't do. So, and I'm assuming this wasn't just an overnight, you're going to do it, right? You're rebuilding kind of your fortitude to want to get after it. Kind of walk us through what that process for you, like, mentally became, where you find out you're having to go, you're mentally prepared for below the knee, now you're above the knee, you're dealing with all these problems, the phantom pains, but you decide to start doing all these crazy, impressive feats. So what did that look like?
So before I dive into this part of it, I just want to be very clear that it was not easy or pretty. I went through some very, very terrible things, like the darkest moments of my life, and I also drugged down the people that meant the most to me, like my support system, my friends, my family, my loved ones. Like, so much so that there was a point that I didn't want to live anymore. And for whatever reason, I don't care who it is, who you believe in, but God or whoever spared me again and kept me around for a little while. And then that's when the light bulb went off. Like, my dad came to me and he said, "You got to be shitting me. The enemy couldn't kill you, and now you're going to do it for them." And that was honestly the moment that I decided that I was going to at least pick myself up, dust it off, and figure it out, how I was going to continue moving forward for the men and the women who never made it home, or the men and the women who might be a little bit more worse off than me. Like, terrible things happen, and I can't control that. Like, but I can control how I react and how I respond to those things. Like, I cannot control the circumstances, but I also can't control, like, I can't let them control me either. And so, eventually, when I was still in the hospital, there was a nonprofit that approached me, literally came into my hospital room and asked if I had any desire to learn a winter sport. And again, knew nothing about winter. I was stationed in Florida, or lived in Florida, stationed in California, Hawaii, and Afghanistan. Like at that point, that's all I knew. And so in my mind, I was like, absolutely, I'll do anything, even if it's like curling, just get me out of here. And like, so this nonprofit brought me to Breckenridge, Colorado, and no one looked at a medical clearance. Like I was not really supposed to be snowboarding. But I saw somebody go by on a snowboard and was like, to hell with the sit ski. I want to figure that out. And that was like that one thing where it was like gave me that new like passion, or at least that new drive to wake up every day. And so, yeah, fell in love with snowboarding just because, again, it was something that kept me upright and it kept me moving. And it was something where it was nobody could do it for me. Like it gave me the opportunity to fail and to be vulnerable with myself and like whatever, curse my name, curse everybody else's name around me. But then I still had to get up. Like nobody can get me down the mountain. And so, yeah, it gave me this whole new confidence that I could go forth and do anything like with the injuries. And over time, I ended up competing like alongside Team USA in border cross and bank slalom, and but it was just like one blow after the other. So I ended up, had this opportunity to be able to represent my country again by wearing the Team USA uniform, and then sure as shit, November 2016, I had to have another surgery. Had to lose more of my leg, and that was just, again, just another huge blow where it was like every time things started to look up, there was another surgery. There were like in big surgeries, not like a simple break or anything. It was like they were cutting off more of my leg. And I finally got into this position where it was like I needed something to get away from everybody. I needed the outdoors. I needed to get away from screens. I needed to like really figure out what I was going to do to like starve my ego, because ego was what was getting in the way. Like it's easy to sit there and tell yourself, woe is me, or why me, or whatever. But if you're on the outdoors and it's just you and your thoughts, it's a little bit different ballgame. There's less distractions. So in March of 2017, I decided that I was going to go down to Africa and climb the tallest point down there, Kilimanjaro, down in Tanzania. And when I got down there, again, 4 months fresh after a surgery, ridiculous amounts of pain, should not have even been walking as much as I was, let alone going down there and hiking. But I was up and down just over 19,000 feet over 4.5 days and back down. And that's when I realized, like, okay, I am still an athlete. I can still do these things. But the best part of all of it was I was able to integrate like being of service to people again. We ended up raising $150,000 for clean water for the East Tanzanians. And then that's when I was like, holy smokes, I can still be in the mountains. I can still climb. But then I can also serve. I can still help people by doing these things. And so that's what eventually catapulted me into doing all of my big climbs and making sure that every climb always had something to help people of the local community or to help veteran nonprofits back home.
What your climbing resume is pretty impressive. So just kind of, I've climbed a couple small mountains in Colorado, but nothing like that. So talk about some of the trips, and I mean, did you set out to do that many peaks, or was it just like, I'm going to do this one, and then you're like, well, that was good, I'll go do another one? Like, how did you have some grand plan, or did it just kind of pop up as you went?
Well, so first and foremost, like I am a loose operation, operating very loosely. No, and I got like when I came home from Africa, I had already had another climb lined up. It was like much more technical, volatile climb down in Indonesia, and it was kind of entertaining, the idea of like doing Denali, because I always thought Denali was just huge, massive, just beast of a mountain, and really that's what it was. And so I told myself that if I could go down, be successful at this climb in Indonesia, then I would put myself on Denali. And then by that point, that like, yeah, did Carstens beautifully, got out onto Denali. And when I was up there, I was like, well, this is kind of silly. I've already been doing essentially 3 of the 7 summits, so the highest peak in each of the 7 continents. And so that's when I committed to doing the 7 summits and being one of the first above the knee amputees to ever do so, potentially the first. And then it was just like I fell in love with how different all of the mountains were. Like there's always a new lesson, there's always a new experience, there's always a new team, there's just always things that we can receive in the outdoors, and we don't realize it until we actually get out there and start doing it. So yeah, eventually after Denali, went out to Russia, climbed Elbrus, down to Antarctica, Mount Vinson, Argentina for Aconcagua, Everest a couple of times, which still has my number, and then yeah, a bunch of other smaller climbs in between.
Unreal. That's freaking sweet. On these climbs, Kirstie, I'm curious, and I've seen the term adaptive athlete thrown around a lot with your name, but on these climbs, can your prosthetic articulate at the knee? Because like hiking, no, it can't.
No, it's the wildest thing. Well, okay, so there's two sides to that too. So no, I can't articulate. It does nothing for me. I actually leave it locked out most of the time, depending on what the
Okay.
terrain looks like. Yeah. So like, basically, if you were to watch me climb, it's like doing thousands of like lunges and just like tricep dips if I'm using crutches or anything. And then just because like it's unfortunate that it took so many, like it took the war, like 20 years of war basically, for there to be the advancements in technology that we have right now. But there's still nothing out there for people like me who want to be able to do these things. So I actually make my own prosthetics, like rivet weld them and put them together and like just
Cool.
make something that works. But yeah, otherwise, the prosthetic that I climb in is actually the one that I'm wearing right now, like my everyday leg. It's just a simple. There's like one teensy tiny hydraulic actuator in it, and it's, I mean, basically just a free swinging hinge. It's kind
So
of
not
nuts.
only are you climbing the highest peaks in the world, it's double, triple, quadruple times as hard for you to do it than other folks.
1,000%. And I think that's one of the, like, another thing that people don't realize, like in our, like people below the knees as well, but like for above the knee amputees to do anything, we like burn so much, like just
Yeah.
calories and energy, like in our day to day. Like on an average day, I'm probably burning like 4,000 calories. And that's not even doing anything wild. Like, that's not climbing. That's just walking around and being upright and independent.
That's unbelievable. I hate hiking, so more power to you. That's,
He's got two good legs.
yeah, my legs work okay, and golly, that's hard stuff. Luke took me out hunting near you on the western slope of Colorado in November. I thought I was gonna have a heart attack. I was like, oh my gosh, and that was just at 9,000 feet. And there
Not a
you are,
big height guy.
climbing up into the clouds. That's unbelievable.
So I'm assuming that you've had some pretty tough moments on these hikes. Hikes is a very loose term for them, but on these epic climbs. And so if there's any one time that kind of stands out for you, if you'd like to share, just because you have every excuse, every possible reason to quit. Nobody would be like, oh, she quit. They'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I mean, she lost 80% of her leg, right? So with every reason, every excuse to take the easy out, you choose to continue to move forward, to make the climbs, or I'm assuming you've experienced failures and have gotten back after it. Like, what's something that kind of sticks out in your mind of a time where you had to overcome those thoughts and that feeling of wanting to just give it all up, and that you move forward? And where did you draw from? What was your mindset? How did you, get over that mental wall to actually complete whatever, climb or task that was?
Yeah. Well, two different experiences come to mind very quickly. The first was, so actually I'll start with Karsten. So the climb in Indonesia that I was just referring to, it is an absolutely brutal trek in. I mean, it's like, if you're going to trek through the jungle, it's 73 miles through a very war-torn space. There's the Dani and the Moni tribes who are at war every single day. You're like bribing people to go over their bridges. It is just excruciating. And like the terrain that you're going through just to get to the base of this very technical rock wall, which is the sharpest rock I've ever experienced in my entire life. It is like, you go through the jungle, you go through snow, it is just insane. The stuff that you're already broken down, you're worn down by the time you even put in your base camp. And at the base camp, like after we got there, we got situated and all of that. And we had to make up a little bit more of a like a unique plan for me, just because, I mean, it was the middle of July, but of course, like a blizzard's coming in. We're the only team out there, and we end up putting in a high camp. And right above this high camp, obviously in third world countries, like the climbing standards aren't all the same. I mean, you have like guides down there that are climbing in wellies, like rubber boots, and we're all like kitted out head to toe in the most amazing gear. But on this climb, like there's huge Tyrolean traverses, which are essentially steel cables that suspend canyons, and so you have to figure out your way to like shimmy across them or tightrope walk across them, whatever. Like, anyways, summit, and we come back down. At this point, it is now, we're soaking wet. It's so cold, we're like, everything is freezing to us. Our gear is all filleted because this rock is so sharp. Headlamps are dying because, again, it's been on forever. And then we get back down to this section where you have to, like, it is like 10 different ropes. They're all shredded. They're all disgusting. They are all ropes that probably no human should ever be on. But we have to like go down them to be able to get back down to our high camp. And in that moment, I was absolutely terrified. Like, I jokingly say that's when I found Jesus, because I felt everything from fear to anxiety, but I was also proud because I just summited. I actually did this. I became the first above-the-knee amputee to climb this mountain. And, like, I just went ghost white. And my camera guy, a good climbing partner, he looks at me and he's like, you have to get your shit together because this is where everyone dies. And, like, and no kidding, the entire way down, there's, like, these plaques for all of these people who had passed away on that specific section. And in that moment is when, like, I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but that's why I have Die Living tattooed on my arm now. That's because, like, as soon as he said that, it was like I snapped out of it. It was, okay, no, we have to make these decisions, where it was, like, we're going to decide to climb, like, to live to climb another day, but then you're also going to have to lean into that fear and ride those emotions, like, figure out how to harness that pain, how to, like, again, just everything that you're going through and turn it into fuel. And so, like, that was one of my biggest lessons in the mountains. And then the second one that came to mind was actually in 2019 on my first attempt at Everest. And it was the wildest thing. We were the first team up. I actually put in a new route from Camp 2 up to Camp 3. We put in the boot pack for everybody, like all of the other hundreds of teams that were going to be going up. We chased the ice doctors and the rope fixers the entire way up to about 28,800 feet. And like, yeah. And so, like, in those moments, like, all I do is, like, I'm just kind of cruising along, like, watching my feet, making sure I don't screw up and fall. And there was a time where I was so hot, which is ridiculous to say because everybody else is, again, bundled up in gear. But I had my summit suit unzipped. I was wearing a tank top underneath this puffy suit. But I'm sweating so much that my leg is falling off. Like, how my leg stays attached is actually a silicone sleeve that rolls over my residual limb, and it stays on by suction. But I am sweating so much that the silicone sleeve is falling off. And I'm at a point, which is above the balcony, a very common place that people are familiar with, are the Hillary Step on Everest. And I'm on this stretch where on either side of me is 3,000-foot drops. And it's like there's not room for error, and my leg is falling off. So then I have to take off my entire summit suit, take my leg completely off to include the silicone liner, dry it off, and then roll it back on. And now we're talking about, now I'm drenched in sweat. So now, like, again, my clothes, my gear, and everything is freezing to my body as I stop moving because I'm not generating heat anymore. And in that moment, like, when I just, like, if I was going to make the decision to keep going, the only thing that I thought about was making sure that I didn't die. Then anybody who would have been watching that climb, I would have given them a reason to be proud of me. But I thought about, like, all of, especially the next generation of amputees, whether they're my age, whether they're older than me, younger than me, whatever. I just thought about, like, wanting to make sure that I gave them, I don't know, like, the beacon of hope that I needed when I was in the hospital. Like, again, I wasn't going to let outside circumstances tell me no, and I wasn't going to let a mountain tell me no. Eventually, I had to turn around, but in that moment, I just knew that, like, I wasn't going to let fear or anything else stop me. Like, the mountain, legitimately, Mother Nature was going to have to tell me to turn around. It wasn't going to be by my own circumstances.
I love
It's pretty
that.
incredible.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. I last
Carter,
40 minutes.
I'm gonna shame you every time you're scared of heights now.
Well,
Like
I'm over
Kirstie's
it
leg
now.
was
I'll never
falling
mention
off,
it
and she did a
again.
3,000 foot drop. Like, shut up and walk. I think his dial-up internet cut out there, but you back?
I'm back, dude. I'm never gonna mention it again. I'm not scared of heights anymore. I'm over it. I have nothing to say. I'm good. Yep. Kirstie has solved my issue. I'm good. I've been yep. I was gonna say I teach high school by day, Kirstie, and I've got a class of AP psychology students. We just started a unit on motivation this past week, and I've got some awesome young women in that class, 18-year-old young ladies who are going off to college next year. And you said something earlier like, I can't control the circumstances, but I can control how I react to those situations. And I'm going to tell them to make sure they're following you and listening to that message, because none of them are amputees. But, the hardest thing that you've experienced up until wherever you are in life is the hardest thing you've experienced, right? And I think that's a really cool mantra. And I just wrote down "die living" and underlined that at the top of my notes here. And I think that's important, especially for kids that age to hear. Especially with you and your background, you've been involved in many male-dominated facets of life, and I think as a father of two young girls, and Luke is a father of a young girl as well, I think that's important too for them to hear from you. So I think that's really, really cool. So kudos to you for that mantra.
I appreciate it. Well, that's speaking of mantras. That's always been like, there's always been one thing that I tell myself, like when I'm still going through it. Because again, like I still deal with pain. Like there are still mornings where it's like I don't want to get out of bed and I don't want to put my leg on. But I always tell myself it's the 6 inches between my ears and what's behind my rib cage that dictates what I'm capable of, or dictates what we're capable of. And so I always like continue to tell myself, like, if you keep your head and your heart in the right place, like you can convince yourself to do anything. And so, yeah, like anybody who's going through it, young girls or not, like I just encourage everybody to stay focused on that, because we don't know what we're capable of yet.
I love that. So going from now, you've done some represented the United States in snowboarding. You've done the 7 summits. Pretty cool place to say I'm done. I'm taking a knee, but you didn't do that. So kind of what was next after you knocked out this kind of mammoth of goals? Because it's really easy, and you might have even gone through this where you get that like post accomplishment depression. You're like, you work really hard and you're focused on that one thing, and you hit it, and then now you almost have another loss of purpose, and you're going through all that back again. I'm assuming you're the type of person that needs to stay busy, needs to have that next thing. So, what did you go through after you reached that accomplishment and you made it? And then what was that next thing, and how quickly did you jump into it?
Well, I think like my strategy to overcoming those, like, kind of the blues that happen after big successes or big hunts or big climbs is really just to remind ourselves that, like, again, it's not done yet. Like, we can go after our wildest dreams, so keep being creative and keep getting after it. I went on to do like some incredible hunts and incredible just exploring. I mean, not even necessarily like trying to reach 29,000 feet, but just going out and really learning about what, again, how I was going to be able to be of service of other people. And now I find more joy in teaching other people how to hunt or how to do the things that I do, whether that's snowboarding, rock climbing, ice climbing, mountain biking, whatever. And I decided that I was going to start the Kirstie Ennis Foundation, so my nonprofit. And so not only does that gives me an excuse to, again, get outside and be upright and be moving our bodies, like making sure that I'm utilizing mobility as medicine, but then now I have like this really unique role of being able to give back and pay it forward. Because I think I'd be a pretty selfish or terrible person if I didn't want to go forth and share the opportunities that other people have given me, or have like taken the shot on me and taught me some of these really unique skill sets that I would have never been introduced to.
I definitely want to get to the foundation, but let's roll back a little bit because this is the Hunt with Feet podcast. So let's talk about your we've got the physical side covered. So let's talk about your journey into hunting, because you mentioned that you did it kind of casually when you were a kid. It was just something that was around. You probably participated here and there, but now you've gotten a lot more into hunting. So where was that reintroduction, or what kind of got you into that direction?
Yeah. So again, when I was still in the hospital and kind of looking for alternate means of recovery, like traditional medicine did not work for me. Like I did not want to sit within four walls of a hospital and try and heal. I did not want to sit in therapy and talk to somebody across the desk who I didn't know, didn't trust, and definitely didn't think understood anything that I was dealing with. So as I again was like introducing myself to the outdoors, there was a gentleman by the name of Ron Rabu, who quickly became one of my like greatest friends. He did recently pass away, but he was just a man. He had two sons, and of course, like his two sons weren't really into hunting. And then they're like out of nowhere, this young wounded warrior, if you will, like wanted to learn everything and anything about hunting. And so he really took me under his wing, and I mean, we went hunting down in Florida and in Kentucky, bear hunting up in British Columbia. Went on him with both of my sheep hunts, and I think because again, like he was a very, I mean, he is a man's man. He's like 60 years old. He was involved in the steel industry. His wife didn't like to hunt. His two kids didn't like to hunt. Couldn't be any more like opposite of their father. And I think because he realized that I was willing to work for it and he believed in me, like I wasn't willing to stop. And so he's the reason that I had like the faith in myself to be able to push myself in the mountains. Like some of the hunts that I've been on are ridiculously tough. And then even after we lost him, I committed to just wanting to continue pursuing and like fine tuning all the skills that he taught me. Because again, like I do believe, like I'm a slightly spiritual person, but I like to believe that he is kind of looking down and watching me again pass on all the opportunities that he gave to me. So
That's
and I
awesome.
think there was something beautiful too about just like reintegrating, like again, like there's something so special about hunting because you do get to provide. It does give you that means to be of purpose again. Like they're like the fact that I have my loved ones come over here and they have no idea what kind of meat that I'm going to give them, because I'm not going to give them a big old piece of cow. It's going to be elk or moose or like my mule deer. Like I think there is just something so powerful about that, and to be not to keep playing like the female card, but again, to always be the little one out there, to be the woman that can actually sit out there and butcher and process and provide, like that's pretty cool, and yeah, something I'm proud of. So
Yeah, that's awesome. And I always recommend hunting to vets because, like, there's something very familiar about it, right? Especially if you're going into like a backcountry hunt, like you got mission planning, you're doing route planning, like you're essentially doing like intelligence, looking at imagery, building your routes, looking at areas that you want to look at that you don't. Like, so it was a natural fit for me because I grew up hunting out east and came out here in Colorado a few years ago and just fell in love with the Western style hunting because it's just very familiar, and I can do all these skills that I've learned over the last decade and then apply them. So I think it's, because we have a lot of folks that listen that aren't hunters that are trying to get into it and learn, but I think that especially if you come from a military background, it's just a great outlet to have something that feels very familiar, gives you that sense of purpose, like you were talking about, being able to provide. Like, there's just nothing better than going through the whole process, start to finish, and then making that first meal and sharing it with your friends and family. Like, it's really, it's very unique. There's very few pursuits. Like, snowboarding's fun. I like to snowboard, but you don't get to the end of it and you're like, now I get to eat this and share this meal with like a lot of people that I care about. So it's a unique outdoor pastime in that regard.
yeah, when you work for it and you earn it, like it makes the reward that much sweeter at the end. And I will say, just the hunting community, like there is nothing that would be able to replace the brotherhood of the military by any means, but the hunting community comes damn close. Just like the support, and then, like you said, being able to go out with a group of people and really put in the work together, the logistics, the planning, the miles that you put underneath your feet, to be able to again come together and um, yeah, reap the benefit at the end. It's and even like, I don't know the best way to put this, but I think especially after I got hurt, and the hunting that I experienced, like it gives you a whole new appreciation for firearms and just taking the life of something. Like there is something so sacred about it and something that we have to respect. And it gives you a whole new appreciation for the cycle of life. I think that was one of my biggest blessings and biggest takeaways from it in the beginning. Not everything that I experienced overseas had to be, associated negatively with firearms or, again, taking lives. So there's definitely a whole new healing aspect of it as well.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Do you have a hunt that like stands out, was particularly challenging or impactful? I think we all kind of have that story that's like, this was the one. Do you have that story?
Yes, but it's so hard to do. Well, I have a couple of them. I'm like looking around at like all of the. So I have a huge thing for taxidermy too. Like I have a 12-foot alligator on the floor over here, like big beautiful buffalo skull. Like my house is just full of animals. It's kind of ridiculous, but no, I would honestly say my doll sheep hunt up in
Did you get
Alaska.
one?
I did. Yeah.
Come on.
So I was.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'll have to send you guys pictures. Like I'm looking at the life-size mounts of them that I have.
Yes.
But yeah, I was up in the Toke area, and again, I was with Ron Rabu, the gentleman who really taught me how to hunt and everything, and like we worked for it. Like I mean, obviously, like spike camps and the whole like all of it. Like it was cold and it was miserable and it was brutal at times. But the shot that I ended up taking on beautiful, it was 12 years old, ram. I was down in a ravine. It was 478 yards, and the way that he was sitting, like this big old fat lazy guy, he was in between these two rocks, and I could just see like the full curl. And he like refused to stand up for hours. He was just literally laying down, eating grass around him. Like it was just big lazy guy. But yeah, the second that he like stood up, just a beautiful, beautiful shot on him. And it was just one of those things where like there's everything goes into slow motion. Like the adrenaline's there, and like it slow motion, but then it's pure chaos all at the same time. And then like how the hell are we gonna get up to it? Like get it back down to me and everything. So yeah, it was just quite the adventure. And again, just spending that time with some really good friends of mine, and yeah, the fact that I was able to bring home such a beautiful animal, and then it's the best meat I've ever had. Oh my God, the backstrap of any ram. Yes, it is the best meat. Yeah. So yeah, just a beautiful, beautiful experience all around. And again, 10 days out in the wilderness, that'll put in some work.
Yeah. And listeners who are familiar with sheep hunts know how physically demanding and difficult that endeavor is with all legs, right? What is hiking on shale and that kind of rocky terrain like?
It is the bane of my existence. I absolutely hate it. Like there's no other way to explain it, with the exception of like taking one step forward and two steps back, because there is no ankle articulation. There is like minimal balance on my left side. Like all you can do is just hope that you're not gonna like slide all the way back down.
Yeah,
And just to be totally honest, like going up sucks, but then coming down is brutal because there is no technique. It's just forward momentum. So I won't even lie. Half the time I'm like, you know what? If it makes sense to slide, I'll get on my butt. I have no problem going into 4 low. So.
I like that. Next time you got a situation where you have an animal that won't stand up, you need to bring Luke with you, Kirstie, because he'll get frustrated with you and then just march over there and be like, "Why aren't you shooting?" And then it'll stand up for you. This has happened before, believe it or not. So take him along.
Speaking from experience.
Yep.
Yeah, sometimes I get a little
What the hell
impatient.
are you doing?
Not me. No, definitely. That's awesome. Yeah, sheep. I've never been sheep hunting. That's definitely on the list. Looks incredible. And I've been to Alaska, and it's incredible country regardless. And then you start getting up to that high altitude, chasing those critters. It's crazy. And sheep hunters got to be a next level of fitness. What do you do for training outside of? I mean, I'm assuming you don't just go hit these mountains, right? So what What does your gym routine look like? What, methodologies do you utilize? What's your training look like?
Yeah. So especially for like, especially when we have like big hikes or big climbs or big humps coming up, there's normally 4 days of strength and conditioning, a ton of interval training, because I think a lot of people underestimate, like you guys were mentioning, altitude and elevation, because like obviously it's a lot harder to breathe up high, and then just being able to make sure that you can control your breathing and your heart rate, because I feel like people get anxious and then that's when they start to panic, and then that's when it all gets out of control. And then honestly, it's just time in the saddle, being able to put 40-50 pounds on my back and then just keep going. And so again, I think hiking and climbing, or even mountain hunts, like I think people underestimate how much of a mental game it really is as well. I fully believe it's more like 60% mental than 40% physical. So just being able to like suffer and struggle through it on, back, like, I don't know, 2, 3 like overnight backcountry hikes is a big part of it as well. So just lots of weight on your back and just being able to put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because that's our training program and that we offer. It's really, we have a heavy focus on the metabolic conditioning, the high intensity interval stuff, because a lot of people, I think, they think, oh, I got to, like, to train for a backcountry hunt, I just need to be rucking. And yeah, there's an element of just, adapting to having weight on your back and covering some distance. But like, if you're not working that heart rate management, it's like the only, like, you can't simulate high altitude at lower altitude, but what you can do is like increase your body's efficiency and its ability to recover and get your heart rate back down quicker. And so that's really important. And then, because I've talked about it on plenty of podcasts, but like the compounding effect at altitude, like even like I live at 6,000 feet, even going, and if I'm at 9 or 10, that's really when I can start to feel it. And the longer you're out there, the more it compounds altitude sickness. We actually had a incident of that with our hunt that we did this last November. One of our guys, who's a super fit dude, was just all gung ho, going 100% all the time. And I was like, look, man, this is gonna be bad if you don't stop. And then sure enough, it caught up with him on day 4. And then it's really easy to talk yourself off the mountain. And your physical fitness definitely has a big part of that, because it's a lot easier to talk yourself off if you're not fit. But man, like, it's a head game the whole time. Like, we were feeling particularly sorry for ourselves at one point, and Carter and I were sitting, as like Carter likes to call them, on the edge of a precipice, and we were pretty much cliffed out. And we were trying to figure out how the hell we were going to get off this bench, and there was no good ways that didn't involve like a 5-mile detour. And I looked at him and I was like, in like a week, all we're going to talk about is getting back on this mountain. He's like, I'm never doing this again. And then, sure enough, a week later, he's like, when are we going back?
That sounds
So,
about right.
yeah. So, just, I think on the mental side, just thinking, like having the perspective to know, like, if this is what you want to do. And some guys will maybe never do it again. But I know if I quit, the second I get off, I'm just going to be thinking about getting back up there. So like, why would I leave if I'm there? And that just helps me kind of keep going. And it's like, if I need to take 30 minutes, an hour, get my head right, it's not a race, it's not a big deal, but just
Yep.
taking that time and moving through, because I've never done sheep hunting, but even elk hunting can get pretty shitty sometimes.
Oh yeah. Well, what's your next hunt?
My next hunt is pigs, actually, in a couple weeks down in North Texas. And I might do an aoudad. I don't know if it's in my budget, though, as I'm getting out of the Army. I've been trying to justify it to myself, but I probably need to hold off. But yeah, so I'm doing hogs. I try to hunt basically year round, so we do a lot of pigs. And then we're doing elk. Carter and I are doing elk in Wyoming this year, which will be fun.
Yeah, cool.
What about you? What are you getting into hunting wise?
Um, Probably end up doing another mule deer, but then yeah, archery elk. And I've never done archery elk before. Actually, never done anything archery. so that'll
Nice.
be, yeah. I'm excited, and there was a long time where I was very committed to my bow, but then like both of my shoulders are trashed. So then I kind of gave up on it, but now I'm, yeah, committed to it all over again. Physical therapy, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Something new.
Hell yeah, yeah.
I,
We're doing archery as well, which I have a love-hate with archery, so it's a good way to not fill tags.
yeah.
Yeah, whole
But
different level.
let's dive into your foundation, and give us with the mission, what you do with that, and then, towards the end, we'll talk about how everybody can go support.
Sure, yeah. So in 2018 is when I established my nonprofit. The name of it's the Kirstie Ennis Foundation. So real original, obviously very creative. But the whole reason of doing it was really just to be able to create a space for good people to do good things for other good people. So we're 100% volunteer based. I'm not paid. I actually to this day still remain one of the biggest annual donors, probably the biggest donor still to date. But was really again just a means to be able to create spaces and opportunities for education and just healing in the outdoors. So like I said earlier, traditional medicines, traditional therapies just did not work for me. And the only thing that I really felt whole doing, regardless of the injuries, mental, physical, or emotional, was really just being outside and exploring. But one of the things that I quickly realized in the outdoors is all of those hobbies are very, very expensive. So what makes us unique with my nonprofit is we teach individuals, they can be veterans, differently abled people, underserved communities. We teach them how to do the sports that I do. So again, everything from snowboarding, mountaineering, we are dabbling in hunting and hunting expeditions now as well. But we teach them how to do it, all expenses paid to include travel, accommodations, give them all of the gear that they need to keep to continue doing their sport well after we help them. So literally head to toe. So for snowboarding, for example, it would be boards, boots, bindings, helmets, soft goods, everything they go home with. And then if they are an adaptive athlete, if you will, we give them all of the adaptive equipment that they would need as well. So we give prosthetics, like I said, sit skis, adaptive equipment. And then the other side of what we do that makes me very proud is I actually go around the country collecting medical device technology and prosthetic components and then recycling them all around the world. And then obviously if there's people here in our country that maybe don't have access to medical care or the VA, the likes of that nature, we also have tools to be able to help 3D print prosthetic components.
That's awesome. No, that's pretty incredible. I like that it's pretty broad. I mean, we've worked with a lot of nonprofits, especially in the veteran space, and I like that we're doing stuff for vets, but it's like you can throw a stick and hit some sort of veteran hunting organization. Like last I checked, I think there's like 4,000 of them in the U.S. And there's a lot of other folks that are underserved. Like we've talked about it in the future, is trying to establish something once I can figure out how to run the business that I have before starting something else. But I think especially like at-risk youth, just trying to get folks that don't have access to the outdoors, because like our core philosophy here at HLE is exactly what you were talking about with how traditional medicines didn't help you. It's like it's healing through community in the outdoors. And I think nature's medicine, I think community's medicine. I think we're so disconnected as a society from both, like-minded folks, a tribe, if you will, and the outdoors, that that's where veterans, they own a lot of the publicity, but we don't own the mental health issues in this country. Like when you look at it, it's not that much different with just, especially in the male population. And I mean, I know women struggle with it as well, but there's a male suicide epidemic that reaches far beyond the veteran community. And so I think having that broader approach is really important, and we need to have more folks talking about it and addressing it. And I think the nature is in the outdoors is key to fixing a lot of that.
No, absolutely. When I think honestly, that's why I started my nonprofit, was I didn't want to get pigeonholed to only helping one type of person, or, a lot of nonprofits, especially veteran ones, they are very regimented in the fact that it's only post 9/11. But there's plenty of other veterans out there who we have no idea what they experienced in their service, whether they deployed pre or post 9/11. Like my mom, for example, she was still bold enough and courageous enough to serve. She didn't deploy, but why should she be, excluded from some of these opportunities as well? So I definitely try to keep that in mind. And like you were saying, I think community is massive. So not only movement in the outdoors, but then also making sure that we have those support systems. And I think there's nothing like it than growing them, in an experience, or like we said, outside.
How can folks check out the foundation, and where can they learn more and reach out to support?
Yeah. So obviously, again, even if you just like looked up my name, Kirstie Ennis, the foundation will inevitably pop up. But our website is thekirstieennisfoundation.com. And then we're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or X, whatever people are calling it these days. And again, it's just the Kirstie Ennis Foundation.
I like that. That's easy to remember, Kirstie.
It's good branding. It actually makes a lot of sense. Folks get too crazy with their URLs and Instagram handles, like real simple. It's always best. You got any? We blew past an hour here, but do you have any kind of closing thoughts to wrap us up? Any advice for everybody based on all your incredible life experiences?
Um, I guess the only thing that I would really say is, again, it's the 6 inches between your ears and what's behind your rib cage that dictates what you're capable of. And then there's nothing wrong with leaning in. If you see something, if you recognize a problem, not only with yourself, but the people around you, don't hesitate to have that uncomfortable conversation. Like 3 minutes of something that might upset you could actually end up saving your life or saving somebody else's. So lean in, get outside, and yeah, use mobility as medicine.
Hell yeah, I love that. What do you got, Carter?
No, just thank you for your time. Really appreciate it, and appreciate you being forthcoming and sharing everything, part of your experiences. And I would like to see that doll sheet mount at some point, if you could send a picture, so I can be jealous and live vicariously through you. But no, it's awesome. I think what you're doing is incredible. So good luck on all future expeditions and adventures and helping people out. So appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really echo what Carter said. Appreciate your time and jumping on with us. I was feeling pretty burnt out today, I'll be honest. And before we got on the call with Carter, I was like, man, I don't know if I have the energy for this. And immediately in the conversation, it fired me back up and helped shift a lot of my perspective for what I've got going on, both personally and with the business and everything. So you're an inspiration. I appreciate all you've done, your service to the nation and the sacrifices you've made. And I'm excited to continue to follow along with what you're doing, and maybe we can collaborate and do something together in the future. It'd be awesome to get out on the mountain and you can show Carter and I up.
There we go. I'd love that.
Hell yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Listeners, as always, we appreciate the hell out of you guys. We'll talk to you next week.